Liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis on a mission to build, resupply, and to do research on the International Space Station.
Ever since I was little, I would dream of going to space, being able to travel and see different worlds. I think it's an inherent pull in all humans to want to reach the stars, see different worlds, explore different planets. Obviously, today's culture is ripe with imagination in regards to space and sci-fi, and I believe that comes from the same unacknowledged pull as humans to want to explore the vast reaches of space.
The three liquid fuel main engines now throttling back to 72% rated performance going into the bucket, reducing the stress on the shuttle as it breaks through the sound barrier.
Regardless to some of the misfortunate events in modern time, the spark still seems to remain, and humans continue to push the limits on what is capable for space travel.
He became the first person to reach space in his own ship. So crazy. And New Shepard has cleared the tower on her way to space with our first human crew. Go, Jeff, go, Mark, go, Wally, go, Oliver, go to space.
Naturally, as a young kid in love with the idea for space, my fascination began to grow for the possibility of life outside our planet and the question of, are we alone in the universe? Mainstream sci-fi films, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, fueled my fascination, and my fascination eventually became an obsession in seeking the truth for that very question.
So for 5 days, a man was borrowed.
Now, as a firm believer of intelligent life outside our planet, I do also think skepticism is healthy, and blindly believing any claim without real evidence does as much harm to the mission as UFO hoaxers. Coming across multiple UFO, alien life, and unexplained phenomena channels on YouTube, it does seem as though that healthy skepticism is lacking on the subject. So as my first video, I vow to only show and talk about cases that are known to have some kind of evidence or credentials to back them up. In love with the idea of alien life and technology that could defy common physics, I have went down numerous rabbit holes in search for the answers that so many are asking. I have compiled a vast array of what some might say useless knowledge on the field of UFOs. As a normal man who has had way too much time to research the subject, I hope you will join me in trying to uncover some of these answers that baffle all of us. Episode 1. The government's UFO programs and reports. Over the centuries, there have been many reports of unexplained phenomena contributed to ET. Light in the sky, loss of time, unexplained disappearances, even cattle mutilations. Up until recent times, the stigma in believers were that of so-called crackpots and loons, and I must admit, even as a believer I am guilty of having the same stigma when hearing about some of these claims. Regardless of some of these inevitable false claims, there are accounts of unexplained phenomena that are not so easily dismissed. And now in recent times, it seems as though we are closer than ever to getting some real answers.
I hear you guys saying there's something.
Yes.
Oh, there's definitely something that, I don't know who's building it, who's got the technology, who's got the brains, but there's something out there that was better than our airplane.
The government has had a long relationship in regards to UFOs, or otherwise known as UAPs in modern times.
Wow.
Unclassified government programs, starting as early as 1947, were dedicated to research and investigate UFOs. The first UFO report, Project Sign, ended its work in 1949 and was only active for 1 year. During that 1 year, it investigated more than 250 cases. It was eventually replaced by Project Grudge, which lasted until 1951, following the longest-lived and most well-known UFO program, Project Blue Book. Blue Book was created in 1952 and lasted until 1969, and it was ran by the U.S. Air Force. And the scientific advisor for both Project Sign and Blue Book was a man by the name of Joseph Allen Hynek. Hynek had a PhD in astrophysics from Yerkes Observatory. He was a renowned professor, but most of all a ufologist, which he is best remembered for. Hynek started out as a skeptic when he was first asked by the Air Force to take part in the projects. It was his careful scientific analysis of the Blue Book cases that led him to become a true believer. Dr. Hynek would eventually come forward to admit that the sole purpose of Project Blue Book was the government's attempt to discredit and disprove the UFO phenomena. That it was his job to report only the cases that were easily explained and to not mention any of the cases that could not be.
I was there at Blue Book, and I know the job they had. They were told not to excite the public. Don't rock the boat. And I saw it in my own eyes happen that whenever a case happened that they could explain, which is quite a few, they made point of that and let that out to the media. Things that the cases that were very difficult to explain, they would jump handsprings to keep the media away.
Hynek's subsequent change of heart on the matter of UFOs is as relevant today as it was in 1966. He saw reports by very credible and professional witnesses and couldn't explain them away nor sweep them under the rug. In 1966, Dr. Hynek wrote in Jacques Vallée's book, Challenge to Science, The UFO Enigma. And over 3 decades later, his words still resonate. As an astronomer, I probably would have never approached the subject had I not been officially asked to do so. Over the past 18 years, I have acted as scientific consultant to the U.S. Air Force on the subject of unidentified flying objects. As a consequence of my work on the voluminous Air Force files, and to a greater extent, of personal investigation of many puzzling cases and interviews with witnesses of good repute, I have long been aware that the subject of UFOs could not be dismissed as mere nonsense. Nonsense is present, to be sure, and misidentification of otherwise familiar objects that many sincere people report as UFOs. But is there not a signal in the noise, a needle in the haystack? Is there not precisely our role to try to isolate the valid from the non-sequential? By carefully working through tons of pitch blende, Madame Curie isolated a tiny amount of radium, but the significance of that minute quantity was world-shaking. The United States Air Force would go on to retire to the custody of the National Archives its records on Project Blue Book relating to the investigations. On December 17, 1969, the Secretary of Air Force announced the termination of Project Blue Book. In later years, Hynek conducted his own independent research, being one of the first people to conduct scientific analysis of reports, and especially of trace evidence purportedly left by UFOs, as well as developing the well-known Close Encounter classification system. Close Encounters of the First Kind, or CE-1, is an observation of a UFO within 150 yards. Close Encounters of the Second Kind, or CE-2, is when a UFO leaves some form of physical evidence, like broken glass, radiation, or some kind of material of unknown makeup. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, or CE-3, is a visual sighting of an occupant or an entity associated with a UFO. An analysis by Hynek of 650 reports found only 1% to be CE-3. Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind, or CE-4, is an abduction of an individual by an alien being or race. Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, or CE-5, is a direct contact or communication with an alien being or race. So what's going on with the government and UFO programs today? We know the sightings of UFOs from credible people haven't slowed down, and in fact have been seeing record amounts of sightings in the past few years. In just 2019, there were 6,340 sightings, according to the National UFO Reporting Center, and much more go unreported every year.
Look, nothing in the sky at all. Then all of a sudden, Bam! What is that?
The year is now 2021, and as of the time I'm uploading this video, for the first time in over 3 decades, the government, or in this case the Pentagon, has released a public report on what, if anything, the government has on UFOs. A $2.3 trillion appropriations bill, known as the Consolidated Appropriations Act, in 2021, itself a part of the Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security Act, was signed into law on December 27, 2020. In that bill, there was a mandate that the Director of National Intelligence work with the Secretary of Defense on a report detailing what the government knows about unidentified aerial phenomena. In 2007, Robert Thomas Bigelow, an American businessman and founder of Bigelow Aerospace, talked to Senator Harry Reid and to launch a Department of Defense investigation into the UFO sightings. In 2009, Luis Elizondo, a former U.S. Army counterintelligence special agent and former employee of the Office of Under-Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, takes over the program and renames the program ATTP.
Tonight, CNN has learned the Pentagon had a secretive program to research UFOs like the one Fravor spotted. The project was called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, run by an official named Luis Elizondo.
I think this is a national security imperative.
Elizondo, like Hynek, was recruited into the government UFO program, and like Hynek, started out the investigation as a skeptic. Elizondo left ATTP after 8 years, annoyed with the lack of dedication into getting real answers or investigating further. In June 25, 2021, the Pentagon released the UAP report, and in an anticlimactic fashion, admitted that UFOs are real, unexplained, and may provide to be a threat to national security. A 9-page preliminary assessment was issued. It stated that the UAPTF, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, focused on 144 observations of unidentified aerial phenomena, mostly from U.S. Navy personnel from 2004 to 2021. Unfortunately, but obviously, no details were given in the preliminary assessment. The report found that the UAPTF was unable to identify 143 of these objects. It also asserted 18 of these featured unusual flight characteristics. These objects appeared to remain stationary in winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion, and even some of them released radio frequency energy that was picked up and processed by U.S. military aircraft. Obviously, the report did not link sightings to extraterrestrial life, with officials saying, "We have no clear indications that there is any non-terrestrial explanation for them, but we will go wherever the data takes us." According to these reports, something is happening, and the government's what seems to be open dialogue for the first time in over a decade on the subject is as odd as the subject itself, and leaves us with more questions than answers. With the release of new leaked UFO footage coming out what seems to be monthly, and statements from high-ranking officials urging the significance on the subject, what does the future hold with government UFO reports and UFO programs? It does seem as though we are steering towards something. Where will we be next year on the knowledge of UFOs? Could it be full disclosure? Will we come any closer to understanding what those lights in the sky really are? Could it possibly be alien life? In an infinite universe? Is it so hard to truly believe? You tell me.
The disclosure of the existence of the ATTP program, Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, and the recent disclosures about what the Navy has seen and admitted that they've been seeing for an over 9-month period UFOs every day almost, and they can't explain them, and frankly they need some help, that's rather startling. It's a very candid confession on the part of the government. So it certainly seems, and my friend Richard Dolan is very convincing in a presentation he makes of sort of the timeline of events leading up to what may be a grand disclosure. There certainly seems to be activity by the US government recently that's consistent with that of a government that's acclimating the populace to a potential grand disclosure.
This is the first edited video, and I hope to do a minimum of uploading 3 times a month. There's so much to go over on this subject, and I hope to do more in-depth videos on specific events in the future. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out. Please click that subscribe button to check out my upcoming videos. Until next time.